In this video, we're going to test the power and traction of the Hudson steam locomotive from Lionel in O gauge, and we're starting right now. Hi, I'm Owen. In these videos, I continue to build, expand, and improve my Lionel Polar Express model train layout. I'm working in O gauge, but a lot of what I do is applicable if you're working in HO gauge or other gauges as well. Today, we're going to test the power and traction of the Lionel Hudson steam locomotive. I have one that's in Milwaukee Road badging. They come in badging from a number of different railroads. You may have one as well. I'm going to determine how many cars I can pull up the grade. Why is climbing up my grade a difficult task? Well, there's two 036 curves at the beginning part of that grade. They both make 90-degree turns. Now, so the locomotive not only has to deal with gravity in going up a grade, it also has to deal with the friction that those 036 curves cause it. The tighter the curve, the more friction, the more resistance there is on the locomotive. I'm going to start out with 3 cars and see if I can make it up the grade with that. Then I'll gradually increase those cars, the number of cars, till I get to a point where I can't get up the grade anymore. And we'll see how far we can go with this Lionel Hudson steam locomotive. Before we get started with that, we have a few chores that we have to do around the layout. The wires on the lever that controls the switch, the remote control switch, are about 6 feet long. Now, I need about 15.5 feet in order to go around under my tables and bring it up and connect it where I want it. So in order to do that, I have to splice in about another 10 feet of wire. And doing that, I have to join together the 4 wires. There's 4 wires in the cable for the remote control switch. I have to splice those together. Those 4 wires for the extension cord will then go inside a wire loom 1/2-inch flexible conduit in order to protect everything and be fastened under the table. To splice them together, I'm using these from a company called Sopobi, and these are solder heat shrink. These butt joiners have a little slug of lead in the center there, which you can probably see through the plastic, and that little slug of lead actually melts from the temperature of a heat gun. I don't have to use a soldering iron, so I think that's great. So I'm going to be using these to join them together, and I'll get started. This is the wire coming down from the switch on the far side of the table. Once it gets under is where the splice begins, and there are the 4 splice wires running through this conduit around under the table and across the end table back to the opposite side where they'll turn a corner and then go along the side table to where my controls are, and I have them then coming out and connecting back to the switch lever, which I have mounted right next to the switch lever for the near side switch. This is where I have the conduit wires concealed for the near side switch. This is the tool that I've acquired to put the wires inside the conduit, the wire loom conduit. It works just remarkably well and saves all kinds of wear and tear on your fingers. First you put the wire inside, locked, closed, then you slide the conduit through along the tool, and it places the wire inside just as neat as can be. The wear and tear on your fingers if you don't do this is really kind of excruciating, and this makes a remarkable difference. Here are the 2 036 curves that I mentioned earlier. One is just the other side of Skeeter's bait shop over there, and the second one, as you come across here to go up the last part of the grade, is the other 036 curve. Those are both 90-degree turns, and that takes a little bit out of a train when they're trying to go against the force of gravity to go up the grade, plus go around and take the friction of those 036 curves. To switch between track 1 and track 2, we have paired switches, one on each side of the layout. This is the near side, near where my controls are, and then there's one the other side of the depot. So let's get the trains rolling and get that test started. I'm going to make the first attempt at the grade with just 3 cars behind the tender. And if that is successful, we'll add additional cars and keep on adding cars until we get to a point where we can't make it anymore. And here we go. It's going to first run through that switch, and then it'll go on a switch from track 2 over to track 3. Well, we did just great on 3 cars. We're going to back up and connect up another one and see how we do with another car. Watch the difference in going downhill as compared to what it would be with the LionChief. With the LionChief locomotive, it's basically a runaway train when you're going backwards downhill. With the LionChief Plus, it really holds itself in position very well. I'm really impressed by that. I decided to get a little more aggressive and add 2 cars to it and see how we do going up the grade with 2 cars additional. Well, that was impressive. It was a little bit of a struggle there a couple of times, especially when it had the tail end of the train on the one 036 curve and the locomotive end of the train on the other 036 curve, fighting up the grade at the same time. But nonetheless, it did it. Well, that last run was with 6 cars and it did that, so I'm going to go for broke and give it a try with all 9 cars and see how it does. Well, that's pretty amazing. We got all the way to the top, but it won't go in through the switch here. I'm going to back it up and try that again and see what happens if I let it try one more time. Well, that was impressive. I am amazed that it did as well as it did. I pulled that train up the hill using the Hudson steam locomotive with a 9-car consist. That's just really impressive. Now I've got the controls for my crossover switches nice and handy here. I'm going to flip those. And we'll see if we can do the crossover and see how that works. So we have successfully reversed the direction on this train by going across the crossover, and that switch on the other side should automatically go back into position when the train approaches it. Yeah, there it did. It went back the way it's supposed to. So now we're going to try to take it down the grade. Let me flip the lift bridge up. I don't want to get too much speed on it. I expect that it's going to do the same thing going forward as it did going backwards, and that is to maintain its speed at a constant speed against the grade. but we want to make sure that that's the case before we get really reckless with speeding it up too much. Yeah, that's maintaining its speed. That's great. I just think this is so much better than the LionChief. We got the whole train now, and we're going to go back onto track 1 as we go through the paired switches on the other side. So now, by using the crossover on the elevated track as the reversing loop, I'm able with the freight train to be able to take it up to this upper level, turn it around, and bring it back down going in the opposite direction. Can't do that with the LionChief, unfortunately. Doesn't have the power to pull the whole train up, but I'm really delighted that the LionChief Plus does. I'm just really impressed by that. I think that was a great maneuver, and I'm really pleased with how that worked out. Well, that'll do it for today, folks. I appreciate your time today watching. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Like the video, click the thumbs up down below and like the video. Share it with anyone else you know that may be interested. And I appreciate any comments as well. What do you think of this approach to a reversing loop? Thanks for watching.